And after that, here Kasparov goes for bishop to f8, preparing for g2 so that he can bring this bishop to g7. Okay, so here Kramnik goes for bishop to b1 because he might be worried about the move knight to b4, which targets this bishop. But instead, it's better for white to bring this knight to e5, asking for knight exchange as well as keeping an eye on the c4 pawn. And the best move for black is to go for rook to c8, guarding this knight. But let's suppose if black is not careful and he decides to capture this pawn on this knight on e5. Now after takes, since this knight is attacked, so knight to d7, and after that simply takes, bishop takes d5. Now comes bishop to b5, okay, pinning this knight. And suppose if a6, bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, and after that knight to e4, threatening to play knight to f6 check. So to defend this, the only move for black is to bring this bishop to g7. And however, white can go for knight to f6 check. This is because after takes, and in the next move, white will go for queen to e3 with the idea of queen to h6 and queen to g7. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move bishop to b1, and after that, here Kramnik goes for knight at d goes to f3. He might be preparing for knight to g5, which targets this pawn on f7. But that's not a big issue, because here black can continue by capturing this pawn on d4, c4. This is because after takes, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, knight to d7, asking for knight exchange, but simply f4. If knight takes e5, f takes e5, bishop to a6, targeting this pawn on c4. But white can simply defend this by bishop to d3, and now f6, attacking this pawn chain, takes, queen takes f6, and finally h3. And you can see this game will continue like this. But in the actual game, after the move knight at d goes to f3, here Kasparov goes for knight to d7, asking for knight exchange. But what if white captured on d5? Let's suppose if c takes d5, now black will also capture, and as you can see, this queen is now pinned, so white has to move it anywhere. Let's suppose if queen to d2, simply knight takes e5, knight takes e5, queen to c7, creating some pressure over this knight. And let's suppose if white decides to attack this queen by rook to c1, black can easily tackle this by queen to d6. If takes, simply bishop takes c8. Since we need someone who can continue some pressure over this knight, so that's why we captured with the bishop. And you can see if this game will continue like this. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move knight to d7, after this move here, Kramnik decides to bring his knight back to g4, which is an inaccuracy because previously you could see this knight on e5 was creating excellent pressure over the black position. Uh, and uh, and since this knight is on g4, Kasparov immediately goes for h5, attacking this knight. Okay, so now it's better for black to go for knight to d7, trying to exchange this strong knight on e5, but instead here Kasparov brings his another knight to d6, which allows white to bring this knight back to e3. And now it's better for white to continue with knight to g3 so that he can target this knight on f5 as well as attack the pawn on e4. But instead he blunders by knight to e3. And that's the blunder because now black can consider this amazing move queen to g5, preparing for f6, which will trap this knight. And the only defense for white is to bring this bishop to c1, which is a very good move. And now it's recommended for black to sacrifice this knight so that he can capture this knight on e5 by his queen. But let's suppose if black is not careful and he goes for f6, trying to trap this knight, but that will be a huge blunder because of knight takes f5, which also gives a discover attack to this queen. And let's suppose if queen takes f5, now comes g4, attacking this queen, and if you takes, simply h takes g4, and as you can see, this queen is now trapped. Wow, that's amazing. Imagine getting trapped by a bishop and a single pawn. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move knight to e3, here black missed that move and instead he goes for queen to c7. And after that, here bishop to c1 by Kramnik, preparing for bishop to f4 so that he can guard this knight as well as create a discover attack on this queen. So that's why after seeing this, here Kasparov slides his queen to e7, maybe hoping for some infiltration through the h4 square, which might be the best option for this queen. And after that, Kramnik goes for queen to e3. He might want to go to g3 square and black can easily stop this by queen to h4, but instead he made a mistake by queen to d8, and that's a mistake because now this invites white to play queen to g3. And now rook to e6 by Kasparov. He might be preparing for queen to e8, and now it's better for white to continue with g4, trying to destroy this triple pawn structure, but instead he made a mistake by pushing this pawn further to c5. And that's a mistake because now black can restrict the movement of central pawns by bishop to d5. But Kasparov also missed that move and instead he goes for b5. And now it's better to take this a4 pawn, but Kramnik brings his knight to c4. He might be preparing for knight to d6, but that's a mistake because now black can consider this amazing move bishop to d5, targeting this and this. And let's suppose if white goes according to his plan by knight to d6, now you might be shocked that In this position, black can actually sacrifice his rook by capturing this pawn on b3, completely ignoring this move. This is because, let's suppose if white captured on c8, then after queen takes c8, now comes queen takes h4. White will obviously go for this free pawn, but we can continue by a5. And now tell me, who is going to stop these pawns? Let's suppose to stop this, if white goes for bishop to a3, now comes bishop to f6, attacking this queen. And if this queen goes to g3, now we can go for a4. And in the next move, black can continue with queen to d8 with the idea of bishop to h4, which attacks the queen, and you can see it's all over for white. Okay, so in the actual game, after the move knight to c4, here black decides to capture this pawn on b3. And after that, here Kasparov sacrificed his rook by bishop to d5, with the same idea which I mentioned earlier. And after that, here Kasparov brings his queen to e6 so that he can promote his e-pawn. And the best way to stop this is simply rook to e1, but again Kramnik missed that move and instead he goes for queen to b5. Maybe he wants to keep an eye over this e2 square, but it's too late because of. And in this position, Kasparov sacrificed his bishop by bishop takes f3 so that he can destroy the security of white king. And in this position, finally queen to f3 checkmate. What's an amazing game by the legendary Garry Kasparov when he was in his prime. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.